Welcome to today's Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz. I'm Bob Bertucci here with fellow Master Coaches Cathy George, Nick Haley, and Bill Walton. Today's topic is the NCAA Transfer Portal. Is it a blessing or a curse? And to introduce today's guest and give a brief history of the 100 years of yelling about transfers is Master Coach Bill Walton. So Bill, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest for today?
Thanks, Bob. Most of us seem like we've been in the NCAA for 100 years, but we haven't. So to give everybody a brief history, a very brief history, since the beginning of college sports, which is back in the late 1800s, people have been yelling about transfers for more than a century. Coaches have been complaining since the start of the NCAA in 1906. Transfers make it too hard to manage a roster. Transferring threatens our whole sport. No loyalty, blah, 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 blah. Those, by the way, are quotes from 1906, not 2022. The arguments about transferring are not new to the use of the term, except for the use of the term online portal. It's new to these arguments, but not new to college sports. And during the last century, most arguments about transferring end with the rules that give athletes vastly less freedom than coaches, administrators, and regular student population. In 1929, an article was written about how they viewed the transfer situation ending soon because of the progress that had been made. Here's the quote: "One phase of the progress of American college athletics towards decency during the past 40 years, they mean before 1929, not before 2022, by the way, is gauged by the disappearance of the tramp athlete. From 1890 to 1905, he was to be found upon most college football teams. It was common practice for partisans. Partisans is an old word for boosters of certain larger institutions to make almost regular annual campaigns for drawing players away from smaller colleges. The ease with which an undergraduate at one institution might transfer to another, following the important principle of migration, was furthered by the fact that registration of special students in a single subject was common practice. Fortunately today, 1929, a just appreciation of the functions of migration on the part of administrative officers, the strengthening of college standards, the adherence of conferences to 1-year and 3-year rules, and above all, the enlightenment of college opinion has practically eliminated the tramp athlete and his cousin, the ringer." So here we are in 2022, and that article could just be changed by dates, and we're still in the same boat. Pay to play and the transfer portal. So with new and old arguments about the devil that is transferring, we bring you a discussion on the transfer portal, how it got here, how it's being managed, and what the future might be. So without further ado, we all need our compliance officer. We brought one today, Kevin Fite, the Associate AD for Compliance from Oklahoma State University. Kevin and I are old friends. We both worked at the University of Houston. He was my very first compliance person because when I started, I was my own compliance person. So here he is, Kevin Fite. Kevin, could you give us a bit of your background in NCAA compliance from both the NCAA and the institutional side, so we and our audience have a good understanding of your background and some very excellent expertise, by the way. Hello, Kevin.
Thanks, Bill. I guess it will remain to be seen if it's good expertise, but I'll do my best. I've been working in the compliance area for, I guess, since 1995. And if you want to include working in academic support for student athletes prior to that, I suppose you could get me well over 30 years of experience doing that. I actually started out as academic support at Iowa State as a graduate assistant working on my master's degree. And my first job after that was here at Oklahoma State as an academic counselor in our athletic program. That got me involved in eligibility rules, which I enjoyed, and led me to the NCAA, where I worked for 6 years. 4 of those years processing issues with student athletes eligibility, either with waivers or their involvement in violations and reinstatement requests and imposing penalties based on student athletes' involvements in violations. The last 2 years, I worked as an enforcement representative processing major infractions cases. And then from that point, I moved to the University of Houston, where Bill and I met, and served as the chief compliance officer there, the associate AD for compliance for 9 years. And at that point in 2010, I moved back to Stillwater, and where I've served as a chief compliance officer the entire time, and serve as a senior associate athletics director for compliance here. Been a lot of changes during those times. Sometimes I have to double check myself to see if I'm remembering an old rule or a new one. And you know, the transfer rules have been something that's really always been an issue. And you know, I suspect many of your followers and listeners, our viewers, are volleyball folks. And Bill, you know, I haven't worked in volleyball rules for 13 years now, but as I recall, the volleyball was the one sport that did have the one-time transfer exception, which is an interesting element to this conversation, because in some degree, those sports that had the one-time transfer exception, what we're dealing with is not as different as certainly as sports like basketball and football and even baseball, where they did not have that. I think ice hockey being the fourth one, but there are certainly different elements and more flexibility or freedom for the student athlete to do that with the transfer portal. And the main thing being that you know, under the previous one-time transfer exception, an institution could basically block a transfer. Right. They could block a release. They could block a one-time transfer exception without really having any reason, except that they didn't want the student athlete to do that. And I will admit that I didn't really think there were many issues or see many issues with that. And I'm talking mainly about the sports that had the one-time transfer exception. I think for the most part, those were handled appropriately. But there were many folks in the public, in the media, and in athletics possibly, that felt like the basketballs and the footballs, it was an unfair situation for those student athletes, and wish to open that up. And particularly, I think it comes from when you see coaches moving with great freedom from institution to institution. That was the argument that was brought forward, you know, is that you needed to look at that. I think the pendulum has swung about as far as it can swing when it comes to the transfer issue, in that we have given student athletes a lot of flexibility and freedom to do that now by getting into the transfer portal and being eligible immediately for that that first transfer. And we'll kind of see where it goes from here. But you know, particular questions about getting into the transfer portal, I mean, I can address with you, and then we can certainly talk about some of the changes that have been implemented recently that I think is kind of dialing it back a little bit.
Kevin, if you could you just kind of give us a quick mechanics of the portal, just briefly, just in case there's some people listening who don't understand, because there's been new things about when you can enter, what happens when you enter, how do I enter, what happens once I'm in, and once I've announced I'm in the portal, if I'm on scholarship, what happens to my scholarship?
That's a lot right there. So if I don't hit it all, remind me the things that I've missed. So obviously, a student athlete gets in the portal by requesting that from their institution and from their compliance office. That's certainly how we do that here. And we require a written request to do that. But under NCAA rules, we have 2 business days to get them in the portal. And the portal is set up on an NCAA website with all the information on that student athlete. And as you know, with the eligibility center, with APR, all that, basically the NCAA has a database of just about every student athlete that is participating throughout all divisions. So you can get in there and get a student's ID number and get them entered in there. And a lot of that stuff can populate on its own based on the information that they have. And institutions will be able to, once they're entered into the portal, they can see who's in portal, search by sport. So every one of our sports has somebody on their staff who's likely it's their responsibility to look at the portal every day and see who's in there and figure out if they want to pursue that person. A student athlete, when they go in, they have the option of they can open it up and list their phone number, their email, their addresses, so that institutions can get a hold of them, or they can go into the portal, but basically put it on quiets and say, we don't want to be contacted. It gives them the ability to contact institutions on their own rather than be swamped with calls or
So
emails.
can we take a quick pause here? So if I'm I walk down and tell your compliance person I'm in the portal, my data gets populated in there. I then have access to the portal as a student athlete to my page, and I can actually customize it so that I can do what I want with it the way I want it. So I can
Well,
go
actually,
silent or.
It's actually done in our office. We do it at the request of the student athlete.
Okay, so it's done by the request of the student athlete.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I've got that right. I mean, I don't do that myself. I have someone that does that for me. So, but I think I've got that right. But they can't place restrictions on it so that if they're not wishing to be, because as we often hear, sometimes people have already made their decision before they go in the portal, meaning they know where they're going to go.
No, that doesn't happen. Would be unethical.
Kidding, really? Never.
I hate to be cynical, but it could happen. And you know what? Maybe it's just they want to go home. Maybe they're at an institution, they want to get closer to home and they don't want to be, and I'm being serious here, I'm not being facetious, but it's sometimes those scenarios exist.
So a student walks in, they put themselves in the portal, you handle all the business, and then you ask the student, have you told your coach? And if they haven't, who calls the coach?
Well, we tell our student athletes, you've got to let the coach know. And the other step to this process.
That's not a rule though, right? They don't have to, you tell them that.
Right. We tell them that, but then we will notify the coach.
Okay.
And let the coaches know that they've asked to be put in the portal. And early on that was like an uncomfortable situation. Now it's so commonplace that it doesn't come to anybody's surprise when someone has to be put in the portal. Now you'd asked about aid. NCAA rules, as you likely know, if you're in a financial aid agreement, the institution is bound to provide that financial aid to that student athlete. And so many of us now have those multi-year agreements. So if you're looking at a 2-year, 3-year, even 4-year financial aid agreement, you're bound to provide that aid. Well, once a student athlete asks to be put into the portal, the rules permit you to cut their aid at the end of the term in which they ask to be put into the portal. So it really provides a release with the institution for them to no longer provide aid to that person. And it's a risk for the student athlete because once you request it, then there's a chance likely that your aid will be canceled at the end of that semester in which you request it. So what I think what brought on the change this year with the windows is you just saw a lot of movement and a lot of last minute movement. So what the NCAA did was they developed windows in which student athletes can enter into the portal just during specific times. And so that it really provides, I think, some coaches some opportunities to say, okay, now I know what I got coming back. I know what I got leaving, and I'm figuring out what the needs are. It varies by sport, primarily based on fall, winter, and spring sports. Since this is a volleyball discussion, this past year, the window for women's volleyball was November 28th through January 11th. Was that first window. And then they have a spring window of May 1st through May 15th, in which they can be entered into the portal. And that's for your standard 4-year undergraduate transfer who's never transferred previously. Now, there are
Kathy, you have
exceptions.
some more mechanics, don't you? You want to ask Kevin about?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I wanted to ask, I know you have data on this, but what's going on with how many people put their names in the portal and how many people end up with an actual scholarship? Do you have the percentages? What does that look like?
Well, I looked at that from the NCAA's website. I saw 2022, I think it was about 8,000 student athletes through all divisions going into the portal. And about 60% of them having enrolled at other institutions. And
Do you know if that's with aid or is that just their
I
transfer?
believe it's with aid.
With aid.
Yeah. So you're looking at just shy of 40% of folks where it's unclear. You know, they may have gone to a 2-year institution, or they just didn't enroll, or maybe they enrolled without a scholarship.
And I think there's data on if they went to a higher level school or a lower level. Is there something along those lines too?
There may be. I didn't.
Yeah, they probably don't have that. Well, and one question that just kind of comes to me sometimes is I feel terrible for, and I don't know what your opinion is on this, for these young high school athletes that aren't getting, maybe, especially with COVID, the whole thing. And now everybody's using the transfer portal to fill their rosters. And then you have these seniors and juniors in high school that just aren't getting looked at. And especially then COVID, people couldn't get out to see them. So there's been a kind of a probably unintended consequence, but that's what it's kind of looking like. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a reality. And the other thing related to COVID is you had all these student athletes that got a COVID extension. So they're staying in school that much longer, or they're taking that opportunity. You know, you're going to graduate, let's say in 5 years, but you got the COVID extension, you got 1 more year left. So you're graduating and transferring to play your last year at another institution. That's been commonplace in just about every sport. And I do think it's impacted the ability of high school student athletes to receive scholarships. Now,
do you think that when the COVID extension is over, it's really not, it's still going to happen that way for high school because people have gotten used to doing this and filling their rosters with a more experienced player rather than, you know, developing a young player in many cases?
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to be an issue because coaches are now, that's in their mindset that, you know, they're looking at, okay, I've got spots, or I will likely have spots. I'm probably going to look at the portal first because what it may be happening is you're going to have a student athlete that goes in the portal after your season's over, or maybe even after your academic year's over. Your recruiting of freshmen has ended at that point. So you're going to, rather than go get a high school student athlete that has not previously been picked up, they're probably going to go for that transfer who can come in and be that 1 year. What was that word you used, Bill?
Oh, the tramp athlete.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
But no, but it may be that
there was another word that they
I don't know.
Ringer.
In the ringer. Yeah. But you know what? There might be that person might only have 1 year, which then is okay. You go to the high school, but many times they have 2-3 years. So, you know, that does hurt the younger player.
Yeah. One thing that I did want to say is that, and I'll say that the NCAA has gotten better about this too, because now when a student athlete goes into the portal, they have to complete an education module. Through the NCAA on the rules on eligibility and how it's going to impact them. We've done that for quite a while here at Oklahoma State, where we had our own educational module that we provided to them. The difference being the NCAA has the ability to say, okay, you got to get through it. You have to present a certificate before you become active in the portal from their own educational module, which is good. But so they go in knowing what they're dealing with, which is good. But back to your high school thing. Yeah, I think it has an impact because you see it across the board on all sports where folks are now building their programs in two different ways, with bringing in a freshman, but also bringing in transfers.
Right. Well, you hear it in the March Madness, that's for sure. When you start to see these teams come through and you're like, well, there's 5 starters and they're all transfers. This one's from here. No, so absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Cathy, go ahead.
No, I know that's you, hon. Go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for coming on.
Sure.
The thing that's confusing for a lot of people is, and you hear all these stories and you know, they're stories, right? Because nobody knows the rules, so you get stories. But a student athlete comes to school, let's say they come on a scholarship, doesn't work out for them, they enter the portal. There's no obligation by the rules for them to ever have a discussion with the coach from then on. They do probably, like you suggested, they go back and call their club coach. They say, will you shop my name around and see if somebody's interested? They find an interest, they go in the portal, they agree to go to that school. So the school they go to offers them a scholarship. Now, what is that school obligated to provide them with? A scholarship for that year that they come, or a scholarship until they graduate, or what happens next?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's a change under these new implementation of rules this year, in that when a 4-year undergraduate transfer goes into the portal and signs to go to another institution, that second institution is now obligated to provide them that scholarship through their 5-year period of eligibility or until they graduate. So that individual would be a counter during that period.
So can I clarify until they graduate? So let's say they play out their eligibility, they haven't graduated, they go play on a pro team, then they come back, enroll in school. Do they still have their scholarship?
Well, if they turn professional, that releases the institution from that obligation.
So let's say they
better scenario might be, and this is where coaches really get, let's say they complete their 4 years of eligibility at institution number 2, but they have another year of school to graduate. And they're on, Bill, help me out again too. I think volleyball's a head count sport, right? In Division 1.
Yep, head count, 12 scholarships.
I haven't worked in volleyball for a while, but I remember that. So you've got an individual that has not graduated, but has completed their eligibility. But since they're a 4-year undergraduate transfer, that person now counts towards your scholarship limits during that 5th year. So,
Oh my.
That's tough.
It's a big one.
That's a real big one.
So now when coaches are going out to look at transfers, they've got to be sure, and they've also got to know that person is going to graduate and complete their eligibility at the same time.
I just want to interrupt. I'm sorry. But with that, sometimes you don't know what when your transcripts come in, you don't know what classes are being accepted. So you could be what you thought was 1 year and it turned out to be another 1.5 years or 2. So they drop a lot of those transfers.
Yeah.
Hard. Because you don't know that when you're recruiting them necessarily until the registrar gets back and tells you what's going on.
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, our world in compliance, because here at Oklahoma State, we help coordinate that transfer or that transcript evaluation and that degree credit evaluation to see how far along they are in their degree upon transferring to us. Our seasons have changed dramatically our summers are our busiest time now, because you're getting all these transfers, and we have to evaluate all of this, and so that our coaches know what they're dealing with. And the same at mid-year, because of all the mid-year transfers. But it is a huge thing.
So coaches can get themselves in quite a pickle here without advisement from you guys. And they could get themselves in a pickle even knowing what the situation is, depending upon if the player is successful in the classroom or not. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. Or you could have a situation where the student athlete, they come to you and let's say they have 3 years of eligibility remaining. They play for 2, and let's say the coach and the athlete get crossways, and they decide to transfer, or they decide not to enroll anywhere. They're still on your books. You've still got to count them during that 5-year period.
So that was my next question. So they transferred from
Oh,
institution A to institution B. We know the rules now for institution B. Institution A is relieved of that responsibility. Now, let's say the athlete goes to institution C. They probably have to enter the portal to make that move to C. Then B is now stripped of their obligation.
Only if they've enrolled. If they enroll at C, yes.
But they can go in the portal. Now, if they go in the portal, does that allow
You
B
shouldn't have to give them aid, right?
to not give them aid anymore because they went into the portal?
I've got that document in front of me. It'd be hard to find, but I would say no. I would say no.
Really? How?
Because it seems like I looked at that.
That seems to be a double standard if the answer is no.
Well,
It can't
issue
be.
is, and I tell you this, Mick, what they really are saying is, if you're going to take somebody, you're bound to them. So if you're taking a transfer, you're bound to them. So you're invested and stay invested.
All right,
I-
Kevin, for our last question here, we only got about 30 seconds left.
Oh, Bob, I wanted to fight
Well, let's
this.
have
Come
Bill
on.
answer
I'm
that.
not
We've got a lot of
taking this all the way to the NC2A. This is
This is
We're
wrong.
good.
stuck here for another half hour.
I want to see Bill answer a question in 30 seconds.
I want to know how big Bill's file is on all his, breaking of the rules
Yeah.
in your office.
Well, imagine that you were the czar of the NCAA college portal. What changes would you like to see mandated at this point?
My work schedule.
Yeah, good point.
Especially in the summer.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, some of these financial aid things, what you're going to find, and coach, I think it's going to be a while before coaches fully understand the implications, and there's going to be pushback. And I mentioned the pendulum swinging, and I think that'll bring on some of that pendulum swinging back. I can tell you, this financial aid change to me is the start of the pendulum, because really what they're doing is, we've got too many people transferring. We got too many more people in the portal. And if we place these restrictions, then you're going to see less people in there, because there's going to be less coaches taking it. Because this financial aid legislation is a deterrent to institutions taking transfers.
It's basically controlling the demand, regardless of what the supply is right now.
Right.
And I just have to keep saying that the whole thing with the registrar and getting through all those classes, the mid-year one is so tough, because you're dealing with Christmas and holiday after volleyball season. It's very quick. You find out somebody's transferring after their season's over. You're trying to get them enrolled in school. And after you've probably awarded them or said, hey, yes, we want you on here. Here's your scholarship. We find out that they're down 20 more credits. And then you're saying, uh-oh. So I could see that being the harder part for volleyball.
I know Bob's trying to wrap this up, but let me give you one more thing, and then it's going to blow your mind. But you sign a transfer to a financial aid agreement, and then that person either becomes ineligible. Let's say they can't meet percentage upon enrolling at your institution, or they have an injury that prevents them from playing and they don't enroll. you still have to count them in your financial aid calculations until their 5-year period is up.
Can you try to get a waiver on an injury or something? Probably. No?
Well, that's the other thing.
That's tough.
They're pushing back on the waivers now in this process. So there's a lot of things out there from a coaches and athletics administrators situation that really makes you step back and think about how much you want to rely on this. And keep in mind, all of this is going to be felt for the first time in the upcoming academic year.
And are the coaches aware of this?
My coaches are.
I don't know if they all.
How do you feel, but how do you feel across the country? I have talked to coaches that haven't reiterated any of this as far as concern.
Well, Mick, we have a coach coming on next. Why don't we ask
Oh, yeah.
ask David about that? I'd like to thank Kevin for being on and really appreciate the time you've spent. It's been tremendous information. I hope that we can reach out to you again if an opportunity presents itself, so we can maybe have you on to extend this conversation a little bit longer.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
thanks, Kevin. That was great. Now
That was
add
awesome.
volleyball, okay? Add volleyball.
Yes, there you go. Oh, my.
All right, I think we got David coming on right now. So Mick, you can go ahead and as soon as Bill introduces him, you can ask that question right away that you were gonna continue with Kevin on.
All right.
David,
Is
on
he
there?
here?
Well, he's connected
There he
right now.
is.
There he is.
There he is.
Hey guys,
Oh, I know you're sitting outside on campus because the trees are all flowering. Am I right or am I right?
I'm in my backyard. It's spring break, so we're at home.
Very nice.
It is spring break.
Well, David, we have a lot of ex-university coaches here and we definitely have opinions, but I think we need to hear from a present coach that's dealing with this portal situation right now. So I'm going to have Bill introduce you, and then we're going to go a little off script and go right to Mick, because he was in the middle of a question with Kevin, and then we'll go back to Bill for his first question.
Sounds good.
Hello, David.
Hey Bill.
So a little background. David and I first met each other because David was the trainer in 1996, 97, and even before that at the University of South Florida, where Perry Hawkins was the head coach. And he was the person when we got there, we said, we don't always have a trainer, David, tape some ankles for us. So that's how I met David. And then he went into junior college and then Arkansas State, where his last 4 years there, I believe he was over 20 wins a season. And then he comes to Houston, and in 2 years, he's got them up to over 20 victories a season. So, David, just kind of give people, how did you get from trainer to coach at the University of Houston? Kind of give our audience a little background.
It's a fun story. I'll try to make it as brief as I can for this one, but I got a job as an athletic trainer at a junior college in the Panhandle of Texas, and after the first season, the coach got let go, and no one really applied for the job. I have some background, but I didn't know how many timeouts we had. I barely know rotations at the time, but I volunteered myself to be the coach. And in a small athletic department, the AD gave me a shot, and we met the president. And halfway through that season, the first 14 games of the season, I thought I'd made the wrong choice. We started off 1-11 and just didn't click. And then things clicked right after that. We won 18 of our last 24. And then after that, it's like video game numbers where we went 30-6, 31-8. Then I left to go to another junior college right up the street from Houston in Brenham, Texas, and had a fantastic career there, including 2 national titles. Parlayed that to Arkansas State, was there 7 seasons, and then got to Houston as fast as I could. And the last 4 years have been a fun little ride.
All right, Mick, why don't you go ahead and ask him that question you wanted to ask?
And Mick, it's a good thing to ask him because he's got 6 transfers.
Yeah. David, thanks for coming on. I got to watch you work with your team this year. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Really, really impressed with everything. I just like the way your kids played for you. you know, and you didn't have the top talent, and yet you got the most out of every one of those kids, it looked like. And that's my sign of a successful year and successful coaching, when you can get your kids to produce. So congratulations on that. We just had I'm going to call this disturbing discussion about the portal with a person that Bill worked with at Houston before he got to know you, who's now at Oklahoma State as the compliance officer. And he filled us in on some very, very interesting sidelights, I'm going to say, from taking transfers. Bill says you have taken 6 transfers, but do you believe yourself, as well as the rest of coaches across the country, understand the ramifications of taking transfers in the portal and what that means as far as counters and academic responsibilities and that sort of thing? Can you tell us how you guys are being educated, and if you think the coaches are being educated on this?
I know we're educated. Whether the rest of the country is educated is a different question. It's scary. When they first talked about that new twist of legislation coming in, it was scary because it makes you, if you haven't done it already, you have to do your homework and background check the kids much further than, are they a good kid? Can they score? It's going to take you more into that because it's a level of discipline. It's not as scary with a grad transfer. It's more scarier with an undergrad transfer, counting the years that you'd have available. But it's one of those things that if you don't do your homework, you can really get handcuffed, and handcuffed badly. So it's doing, normally if it was a transfer back in the day with SC, it's one kind of small phone call to the club coach. It's one maybe on your assistant if I didn't know you, Mick, or one of your assistants on staff. And then you would just get it as a passing grade and move on. But you've got to kind of check off boxes all the way down the line, talk to every coach. If you can get a hold of trainer to trainer, if you can get a hold of academic counselor to academic counselor, just to make sure that you're, crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, because you can't miss. If you miss and the kid's not bought in, they could easily just put this weight on your back, and then you're going from 12 scholarships to 11 really fast.
Or less, right?
Or less, yes.
Yeah, so they could really destroy the situation for 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
And you can even be on top of this and still have this happen if the player does not follow through on their academic work, or their citizenship, or those kinds of things.
Exactly.
Am I correct about that?
Didn't Kevin even say if they get injured and they can't play anymore, you still count? Wow.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the part we've all had a high school kid go through our program that didn't make it and or didn't do the things they needed to do. So it's that with extreme ramifications from it, where they can stop playing volleyball and saying, I don't want to play anymore on day one. And then you're saddled with them for however many years of eligibility left, or whenever they graduate. So yeah, you have to do your homework more. Whether that legislation rides out, I think it was and I wasn't part of the first conversation, but whether it changes soon when the transfer portal windows, because that was one thing that the transfer portal windows was what the institutions wanted. The SAC committee and the kids wanted more ability to keep it together for themselves. So that was their take back from it. So I don't know, in a year or two, whenever the portal does its cycle and everybody figures out if it's a good thing or bad thing, whether that'll loosen up. But yeah, you got to do your homework.
So let me ask you a question that I ask the compliance person and see what your answer is. Player transfers from A to B through the portal on scholarship. Is that place B gets crosswise with the coach, just decides they want to get out of there and go to C. Now, in the first instance, going from A to B, once the person entered the portal, the scholarship was now handed back to the university, and they could reoffer it or use it for somebody else, depending on how they felt about the kid who went in the portal. And the player now gets in the portal at your school and goes from B to C. What's your understanding of the responsibility that you would have as institution B if the player went back into the portal and went to institution C?
I think it's just keeping their eligibility through their time that they're with you, making sure they sustain, because if there are any flags that'll happen to the next institution, it'll be back on your burden. And again, I'm not sure, because we haven't gotten to that point of us worrying about the next kid leaving us and hurting us, because it just happened. Actually, it hasn't happened yet. It's coming into this summer class is when it's going to start affecting it. So I haven't gotten to there yet. So I don't know if it's, because in the old ways, once in the portal, technically by the rule of the lay of the land, you're washing your hands of the kid, because in the portal you're done.
Yes.
But I don't know what that next wave comes in. One, because we're just still absorbing what the first wave is, much less having a kid wave in and then wave back out again. So there's another part of it that's frightening. So
what I think,
Well,
what I
what we were
think I
hearing,
heard-
Nick, what we were hearing, if I heard correctly,
okay,
was now they go to school C, decide not to play volleyball. School B still has to provide the scholarship. That doesn't make any sense.
it doesn't.
No,
make-
Bob. No, Bob. They don't have to provide the scholarship. They just have to count them to their scholarship limit, even if they're not at. So I go
Okay,
to Houston
so
as
School
I
B
transfer to
can't use
Houston.
that.
Right. I go to Houston, then I transfer to Texas. I get to Texas, and the summer before I get to Texas, I get injured and I can't play anymore. But there's still 2 years of eligibility left. Houston has to count me for those 2 years, unless I play at Texas. If I don't play at Texas, Houston still has to count me and can't use that scholarship for somebody else.
That's what Mick was saying. That's really where the problem lies.
Yeah.
David, you haven't dealt with that yet then.
No, because the rule hasn't kicked yet. The rule kicks in this summer. So all the transfer things, if you're working on a transfer now coming in for the fall, then those kids are going to get affected by this rule. So that's when we haven't seen that. We've got the fear of the avalanche coming, but the avalanche hasn't started yet. Like, we just have the warning signs, but it's going to take one kid. And we all know that one kid will test this rule. And it doesn't necessarily have to be volleyball. It's going to be tested somewhere along the line. So it's just a matter of, to what extent is this going to be national coverage, or at least national within the sport organization coverage.
So in theory, if I come to Houston this year and I show up in the first day of practice, you tell me I'm not going to play 6 rotations, I'm only going to play front row, and I say, screw you, I'm done with volleyball, and I've got 3 years left, you now only have 11 scholarships next year.
Correct.
3 years.
Yep.
For
For
3
time
years.
until you graduate or your eligibility's up. Correct.
So I could say to you, either
Fingers
play me
crossed.
6 rotations. Screw you.
now the compliance guy said not until your eligibility's up, until you graduate.
Yeah.
Right.
He was specific. You can run out of eligibility, but you're still responsible for that athlete until they graduate.
And the bigger question to this is, when the powers that be relook at the portal, they wanted to run another year of cycle just to see if this works or not. Is what changes because of that? What are the new legislations because of it? Because I guarantee you, men's basketball is not going to let this fly long, and football is not going to let it fly long. So we don't have to say in it. We know that. We've all been there before. We can have our opinions on it, but those two people are going to be the ones that flex their muscles on this before we do.
All right, Bill, why don't you go ahead and ask David the question you had holding for him.
Well, it appears from last year's Final Four that the portal is critical for creating a high-level roster, meaning success and wins for volleyball competition. San Diego and Texas are 2 obvious examples. And because Texas seemed to have high-profile transfers, you know, they got accused of being transfer U. But there's a lot of schools that had transfers, including Houston. Can you kind of tell us, is it a blessing or a curse for you on roster management having the portal?
I think it's going to be, one, it's a double-edged sword, but I think it's going to be cyclical, because 1 year it's going to be helpful for somebody. And also I think your transfer, your attractiveness of your institution and your city and whatever it would be is going to be something else that factors into that. So I think some years is going to be a blessing and some years is going to be a curse. We obviously are in the blessing side of it right now because we seem to be an institution that people want to come to. But it's something where you have what it's done is it takes the level of care of your kids to a higher level, because it's no longer stashing away a kid for a year or two while they develop. That kid wants to play, they will go find a way to play. It takes away, the portal takes away the secret deals that the club coach would have. And the club coach would contain that, Bill wants to leave Houston, and he would tell the club coach, and then all of a sudden you're backdooring deals with Texas or Southern Cal with Mick, and just trying to have that backdoor work. Now it's all in the open. Now it's like, we used to call it the deal of the day, like Amazon Prime, the deal of the day is coming out. Who's the next kid in the portal? And now it's more locked into time. So it's now that you don't have to look at it every day. You have to look at it in the cycles, almost every day, but and those cycles kind of fit in. But so it takes away at least the backhanded deals and the things that you would just get undercut. And now it just sets it up that, I was talking to Eric Sullivan before we played at Texas that, it's things that they didn't actively want to go out and grab these kids. They didn't want to actively go out and find new players. They had players that left them. And then so the reactionary was to get better players to come in or equal players to come in. And then that's what just built that roster. And it worked. And San Diego, same thing, it worked. And I mean, same thing for us, it worked. So it's just a matter of, you have to have that level of care where you care about the kids at a deeper level than you used to just be business-like and transactional. It's now talking through the plan a little bit more to a freshman than you would have. It's now talking through to what's the plan for the team a little bit different. But I think it's going to, but also we're in this kind of funny world where the grad transfers, the COVID transfers are going to stop. So we're in this last cycle, if not this year or coming into next year, will be the last year that these COVID transfers were going to be there. So it's just a matter of maybe one more with if someone redshirted, and now it's going to be just straight transfers. So straight someone that doesn't like their institution, not because they have an extra year of eligibility. And like Ohio State did, where had that senior class that, they wanted to build into their freshman class instead of keeping that senior class around. So those are going to stop happening. But it's going to be now just straight transfers in a year or two.
So David, you're bringing in a lot of transfers, but how has that affected your kind of youth movement that can come in and be kind of the fabric that's there for year after year to set the culture and do those types of things? Yeah. It's kind of affecting those younger players. I mean, they're not getting picked up because of the transfer portal, don't you think?
No, I totally agree with you. It's just, so but we're in a unique now where we're bringing in 5 high school kids and then we're bringing in 3 transfers this year. We're building for that. Okay. Both. So we're trying to build the undercurrent of stability from the younger group with just trying to do 1-year fixes instead of having to rely on a freshman come in and hope they play. We're going to bring in one more transfer to give them a year under our system to learn whether they stay. Now that's our job as a coaching staff to show them the way, but we're trying to build the movement. But as Bill told before, it's like a junior college kid. It's like trying to go get a junior college kid in the day to stopgag something to fill a roster, fill a setter. I need one more outside. I need one more something. We would go to that route versus doing the portal now. We talk about hurting high school kids, and that's true. What we're truly hurting is the junior college kid because it's now you're having to deal with I'm a junior college guy where you had those people that you're like, hey, I'm not messing with them because of their academics. There's a reason why they're there. And I don't want to really mess with that right now. So I think you're going to see less and less of quality junior college kids come to the Division I level.
Mm. It's too bad.
That's not entirely true, though. Not all junior college kids go to junior college because they're not capable academically. They go because of financial reasons. I mean, you look at it now, you're paying $60,000 to $80,000 a year. Unless you get a scholarship at a 4-year school, you'd be smart to go to a junior college. I'm a junior college guy too, 14 years, and I know how this works. And we had our players go to Arizona, go to Alabama, go to Texas, go to all kinds of places for the last 2 years. because not only were they good, they got their Associate of Arts degree,
Right.
but they also were good volleyball wise.
Right.
I think the junior colleges get hurt because they aren't seen, and that's one of the things the master coaches are doing by having that transfer portal showcase at the Final Four, so those junior college kids can get in there and be seen by the coaches. We had 117 coaches looking at the people in that showcase last year. So it'll be interesting, but I think it's a tough nut to crack here. This is a hard deal. And how do you feel as far as stability? Do you feel stable with NC throwing rules at you like this?
I think we're stable because we're going to do that extra layer of background check and the things from there. And also we know what we have. So I think we had a strong backbone of returning players, and then to add a layer of transfers, we made sure that they bought into what we're doing. And that wave. And then, so now we're a strong unit, and we brought in 2 transfers that semester. So that was an easier way to kind of get them into the culture. And then we have one more we just announced today that is going to finish us off. And then we're just building from the high school kids. So it's kind of this hodgepodge of things going together. But as long as your core know what you're looking for, I mean, everybody that's on the call I've highly respected. Cathy beat me in my first NCAA tournament appearance.
Carissa May, is it Carissa May? Carissa May?
Yeah,
I remember
Carissa May,
her.
yes, ma'am.
She can hit it. She can bring it.
Yeah. And Mick, I followed you because of your junior college background. I've kind of been shadowing your kind of career through the whole thing. And Bill and I have known each other for a very, very long time. Bob, we've never worked together, but the thing is you have to kind of know what you want from yourselves and your program. Like, you're building, every one of you have built their program to this level where the expectation level is what it is. So when people add to that, they're doing what you told them to do. And everybody follows that line, where it's not, I think having a junior college background has really helped the fact of just how do you plug in pieces and keep the stability of it, because every year you're changing your team. Every year you're trying to build this thing around. But again, it goes to high level of communication, high level of just talking to your kids as often as you can, and not just about your role, but just how's your day, you know, and the little things that get to it, because it's not about just trying to win games anymore.
Well, you're the second person that said that. That must be one of the major thrusts for college coaches right now, is the communication with your players, because they all want to start, because of their club experience. They don't start, they go to the next club.
Well, they
right?
start their own club.
Yeah, or they start
Exactly. Their
own
mom
club.
and dad start their own club for them.
Yeah.
And that's the
So-
scary part of what we've kind of built this monster into. And, volleyball used to be, and we're still there for the most of the grassroots, but if a kid commits, we basically leave them alone. Like, we don't go and recruit under another school because the kids said their verbal commitment. So that's kind of like a gentleman's agreement that we've all had with each other about how to do this. But I think we're getting into the world where someone commits and it becomes a target.
That went south a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, at your level, Nick, but at ours right now, we're still working our way up into that. So, but
Be careful
it's,
what you ask for.
yeah, but it's something where this is all just I know it's on the repeating part, but you've got to, the kids that are in your program that you really think are your future, you've got to kind of treat them like that and make sure they're educated, know why. And because kids could jump at any given moment now because they don't feel their playing time's the right way. Not a given moment with the new transfer windows, but that's something where it's just, if you don't, there's more reasons to leave. It's not this trapped kind of, I got this kid for 4 years, and even taking away the 1 year sit rule. That's not even a thing anymore. Interconference change. That's scarier. Where,
That's scarier.
I mean, the kid we just got today, her and her teammate both left a Big 12 school to go to other Big 12 schools. So now not only do you have to see the kid left your program, you're going to see them once to twice a year. And so that's the scarier part. That's the one thing that, if a kid was going to leave, a kid's leaving, but we used to be able to say not in our own conference and that was an easy kind of thing. But now they can go into your backyard and come get you from there. So you're not just losing, you're going to physically see the kid on the other side of the net.
So
And you can't
David,
do
you might have
anything about it.
You might have just answered my question, actually, because my question to you was, as a coach, all right, what would you like to see mandated at this point, with the transfer portal?
Yeah.
Would it be you can't go within a conference?
I used to be staunch on that, and I'm kind of just torn with all, because whatever you say is the rule is I'd like to go back to. The only thing I just hate is the fact that the control is now with everybody. There's no control, or there's everybody has control, because the student athletes have that thing where they can just say, I want to stop playing, but that doesn't seem right. But we can't limit them when they want to leave, because we didn't like the fact that a kid could leave us, and right after the spring's over, or you still can do that, but where it would hurt your roster and hurt your kind of like, I'm just training a kid just to train the kid. So I don't know what the magic answer is. I don't know why we added the window, because the kids if they're going to leave, they're going to leave in May, which is worse. Like, I don't know why, that we did the Christmas window, which is bad, because then you have to come back and recruit during Christmas break. So you have to come, bring in official visits during that break. But at the same time, now we're going to let it open up in May again. And what are we going to do about it? Go right back in the portal, find another kid? Like, all it's going to be is just the cyclical move of just stealing and taking and stealing and taking. And I think this is a different subject, we're getting into it, but we're going to also see that with coaches soon. After the third coach gets approved, gets locked into July 1, where you're going to go have more coaches. I bet there's coaches that are going to do the same thing, that are going to leave present institutions in July to go somewhere else. And it's going to leave mid-major programs just holding the bag of trying to figure out where they're going to fill from.
It sounds like this has
that's a
really
really good
affected
point.
quality of life, for sure.
It's something you really got to think about if you don't have your ducks in a row. You really got to make sure that your team is solid and you're talking to your team and you're doing the things you need to do. Just because that, again, like, I know that I keep harping on that same thing, but if you're not communicating with your players about their level of happiness every day, and I'm not saying you got to placate to their happiness, but you just can communicate with what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, then you're going to be able to kind of grow from there. But if you don't, and you just assume, that's when you're going to have bad quality of life.
Yeah.
Wow. This
Yeah,
is a good show.
Aren't you happy you're retired now?
Yeah, I
From the
couldn't
college
want to
game,
be
'cause
jumping
Cathy,
into
you're
this
back in it.
mess
You're back
again.
in the game now.
I
Well,
don't have a transfer portal though.
True.
I have a
You
question.
have free agents.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so Mick, you got the last question for David.
Okay, let me throw this, because I have a rant later on this, but I'll
You don't have time.
Imagine.
End of the
Just
show, I think.
imagine that, right? So I don't know if you've been in this long enough, David, but I see the NC2A coming out with these rules and being two-faced here. On the one hand, they say, we want to support the student athletes. We want to do all this stuff. We give them all this freedom. And then they turn around and make rules that absolutely make you the bad guy, because you're going to have to say no or not take a chance because of the way they put the rule in. This is double jeopardy the way I see it. And this is what's wrong with the NC2A making rules like this and not thinking their way through it. And coaches ask these questions because we think like this. But when they make the rules, they don't think like we think. We think about, it's like the libero rule. They put the libero rule in to get more action in the game, and the coaches say, we don't want action, we want passing. We're going to use that position as a passer, primary passer, run our offense and run it right down your throat. So, those are the kinds of things that get misconstrued. I just wish we had coaches sitting on those rule committees, making some kind of observations for the committee so that they would understand what really will happen here. But how do you feel about that?
I think without putting down the ABCA, because I love Cathy George to death, I think you're as good as your the coaches organization. You're good as the people that are speaking out for you. And that's why basketball seems to get things done faster than everybody else does. That's why, because they'll strong arm what they want, and then they usually get it. Like usually if they kind of come up with something, they're usually the first words to kind of grant this thing, and then it becomes privatized just to them. So I think it's something where having more people in the room, and I mean, it's our summer access, just that one thing of just getting summer access. You know, they brought it up, and the Student Athletic Advisory Committee killed it because they brought it up as all sports should get summer access. And then they bring that up and SAC says no, because track, baseball, softball doesn't want to have summer access because they don't, why would they need to be in there in the summer? They just finished. And so instead of curtailing it to just women's soccer, women's volleyball, which is now the latest one trying to get through, we took the first swing at everybody. And when that first swing went through, obviously SAC's going to say no, because it's not just volleyball and soccer kids in the room. So it's this thing that we just don't do the right things for the right cause. And everybody has this thing where, you know, we're trying to be a primary sport, but we have people that don't want to work in the summer. We're there at summer camp in July, but we don't want to work in the summer. We don't want to have access to our kids in the summer because it's too much work. So it's just this kind of, what are we trying to get through? Are we trying to have a lifestyle? Or are we trying to be like basketball? And I know there's a happy place in between the two, but we're sitting on either side of the fence, doesn't work anything because nothing happens. So with your original question of, what do I feel about it? I feel that like when we first heard of the rule of, you know, they can just stay as long as they want if they don't want to play anymore. I felt scared of just, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to get there? But hopefully by that time, in a year from now, we have built ourselves into a program that we can go get good high school kids that don't want to leave. But, you know, in the first few years taking over Houston, you weren't getting those kids because of the record of the past and the things that we've had in the past. But, you know, we're building ourselves into a better brand. But that's talking about me personally. But I used to be at Arkansas State. What are you going to do there? Like, how are you going to get this kind of thing going that is just, it's not great for everybody. And the Power Fives usually take over the whole thing and make it their own, and their voice carries longer, and their coaches are better organized so that they're on the same page. But it's just tough where I'm not as scared about being at Houston at this time, but I know I'd be frightened if I was at Arkansas State. I know it would be the level of talent that could leave me that fast. I cannot replace, because if I get a good enough kid that doesn't like their role, that I told them they're not going to play 6 row, then all of a sudden, then I'm in a different place. And then it just becomes where I get my feet cut out from underneath me, and I don't have an option B. I can't go back in the portal because that level of player won't come back to Jonesboro.
Absolutely.
Or your player is great and they are playing 6 rows and they hear kind of through the rumblings that they can go somewhere. And yeah.
And see, that's exactly in my research. 1906, that was the fear, that the big schools would be using the smaller schools as feeders. So the small schools take the high school kids, and then once you show us who the good kids are, they can transfer and play for me.
Yeah.
And that could be where we're headed if we're not careful.
That reminds me when we first started recruiting, Rudy Suara was at San Diego State, and I had Chris Bigelow as my assistant, and we scouted and scouted and scouted. We had all the best players. Rudy just showed up at the tournaments, followed us around. So Bigelow says to me, he said, Mick, you go over and look at these bad courts. I'll sneak off and look at the kids we need to look at. Rudy followed me to the bad courts, and only took him about 2 tournaments to figure out he'd been bagged
And boozled.
yeah, he had to do his own work. So,
Well, David, we'd really like to thank you for coming on, taking time out of your schedule. It was great to get a current coach's perspective on this transfer portal, and really appreciate you being on with us.
You're great.
Congratulations,
I'm honored.
David.
Thank you. You guys have been a big part of my life, whether you've known it or not. You guys have been big to me, so I appreciate everything you guys have done.
Well,
Thank
good
you.
luck with this
to you.
season.
yeah, good luck, David. You're doing a great
Thank you.
job. Yeah.
You are.
Thank you, guys.
Congratulations.
All right, group, we're going to transition now into our buzz reaction, but we're really out
We
of
don't have
time
any
for
time,
buzz
do we?
reaction. Even though Mick and I are all set up for buzz reaction, I think what we want to do is just congratulate Cathy George on her new appointment, as head coach, and I think as general manager. Is that right? Do we have that right?
It's not termed general manager, but I will be responsible for starting to put together a team, and I'm sure that I have people within this organization that will handle a lot of the more legal parts of that job. Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about it with a few minutes that we have left.
Well, you've learned the talk around already. That was pretty good on the
That's pretty
talk
good,
around
yeah.
at GM. That
Oh
you're
my
right
gosh.
there already.
Yes. Well, I can tell you I'm exhausted already. I've been like, ever since the announcement, I mean, it's been nonstop and a lot of meeting the people. And there's Grand Rapids has a professional organization already here with the NHL's Red Wings team in the Griffins. And so I'm very fortunate that there's a lot of people set up already throughout that can support us in a lot of different ways to get this thing started. So I've been meeting a lot of people. We've been, with different groups and, in and out of those types of things, but it's been wonderful because a lot of good people surround me here.
And how did the press release go? The press
conference? It was good. Yeah, it was good. I can tell you, I was a little like, oh my gosh, my butterflies were there. And, I've been doing this a long time, right? So that was fun and good to have, a lot of people there, and it was well attended, and it was just really good.
Is the community excited?
The community is very excited. Yeah.
And where will you draw from? How big is Grand Rapids? You play all your matches in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, we're playing them in the Van Andel Arena, which I believe is 13,000 something, 11 to 13,000 people. And, the area here is just booming in volleyball. I mean, Michigan's participation numbers are really high in participation of young people in volleyball. And as you know, Mick, the boys volleyball is starting up. I mean, their high school volleyball, they're starting to really put those schools in, and
58 teams just started.
Teams. It's so great
week.
to see that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And so the enthusiasm, and of course with Lake Michigan here, you have a lot of sand volleyball, beach volleyball, and just people get started that way. And we just seem to have a great following, and people want to see it happen. And I think that's why Grand Rapids was chosen as one of the leagues. So
how are you going to name the team?
They did a contest. I don't even know the answer. They won't even tell me. It's under lock and key, but but they had these names brought in. They did it through the community. They had a lot of participation. And so now it's I think it'll be revealed in the next couple of weeks. So I just told them the color palette that I have to have has to be good. It has to suit my, I always wear the colors at the pool or whatever, so I have to have a good color. I get pasty in the winter, so I gotta look good.
So any more news on other teams that are going to name coaches or get started? Or?
No, I really don't know, but I do know that there's rumblings that it's happening fairly soon here. But again, I don't have any concrete information that I can share with you, nor should I, Bill or Bob. You shouldn't put me in that. But no, I don't have any. You tried with Jen last week, man.
We don't get any insider information. You're a part of our team, and we don't get any insider information.
You guys are so funny. Oh my gosh. Nice try.
All right. Well, listen, we're about 5 minutes over time, but Cathy, congratulations. We're real excited for you. When we do our planning meeting on Monday, Mick, you can go into your rant. We'll record it, and then we'll continue doing a buzz reaction there, and we'll just put that up on our website.
I got most of it out with David there because I just think, honestly, if you guys don't feel the same, speak up. But I just feel these rules have put the coaches in jeopardy, especially the majority of the coaches in the middle. Maybe the top end benefits from this because they can draw players away from other teams. NIL is going to pay for mistakes, is the way I see that. I see NIL money paying for mistakes. So you lose a scholarship, but you just make more NIL money up and you can take care of kids that way. I see a lot of things on that. So yeah, Bob, I could still rant.
Yeah,
all right,
you
Bill,
were
why
good
don't
there
you
for
give
not
us
having a rant. You really did.
And Bill, why don't you give us next week's show and who our guest is before we sign off?
Yeah, Michelle Meyer, who started a company, and she named the company NIL. And what they do is they help athletes who want to take advantage of name, image, and likeness. And she's going to give us, we've had a number of different people on, but finally we're going to have someone on who's going to tell us what they're doing for athletes and what it's like becoming a NIL athlete, and how you can take advantage of that.
And the
Even-
company is NIL Network? Is
Yes,
that right? Okay.
yes.
And really, for
That's right.
coaches, it's going to be important to know what the athletes, what their standpoint is and what they're looking for in NIL. So it'd be a good program for both the athlete and the coach, I think.
Oh, everybody. And I think that if you're a high school parent and your kid's playing club volleyball and you want them to play collegiately, I think the NIL people are telling you, go ahead and get started when you're in high school. So find out how it's done and get busy getting your kid funding their own junior program instead of you having to take it out of your wallet.
All right, group, we're going to sign off and we'll see everybody again next week for the Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz.
Thanks, Bob.
Yes.
Good job, everybody.
Good job. Namaste.
Job. That was great.